everybody. This study guide is focusing on the conversion fade. This specific technique requires turning to a winning position into a one game against a perfect defender like Stockfish 17. We pick up right after the action after resignation as I face the engine. Phase 1, material constellation and simplification. Let's start the game. My opponent only plays up to freaking move to move yes, freaking to move 15, and he immediately resigns. So let's get started, and that is the transition. I say again, I'm playing a human opponent into move 15 into I'm in move 7. Yes, move 17. My apologies. I'm in freaking. It's just I can't remember where it was at. Yeah, no, it was freaking. Yeah, it was. Yes, move. What was it called? Move 7. Move 18. My opponent freaking resigns. Now, let's go. Get started. Let's immediately go over the beginning theory. My opponent plays the king pawn opening. I respond with the Sicilian defense. My opponent responds knight f3. Similar to potentially setting up a really Lopez or an Italian. My opponent plays the Italian. I play freaking pawn to e6 to attempt to strike the center immediately with black. After e6, my opponent plays d3. I immediately still challenge anyways. My opponent chooses to. I'm not sure why he moved his bishop out of here, but simply I gained tempo on the bishop, and this pawn is now a simple trade to offer a takes, which will make a endgame really quickly. This is why I immediately strike the center. I immediately take d4, my opponent immediately takes d5, I take, my opponent takes, and I immediately move my pawn to b6 to put all my pieces, as many pawns as I can on the freaking queen side onto dark squares. My opponent responds bishop to f4, shoulder making an x-ray, like a big fat X, like this. Two decently large X's he's attempting to do, which is a pretty decent idea. I immediately go b7, free and shadowing my bishop, getting a long-term scope on this knight, which will be the converting point to this game. My opponent goes knight to c3, I immediately go knight to g7. My opponent immediately goes knight to b5. I simply ignore the threat because I know that through so many games I played against Stockfish, if Stockfish fork, if they fork, then I'm freaking, oh my goodness, my opponent may get a rook, but simply I'll be able to trap this knight completely. So it's 5-3 material. Even though my opponent has the more material advantage, I decided to sacrifice my rook because it centralizes my king also too. My opponent makes an inaccuracy to go knight to c7 fork. I immediately say, okay, let me go trap your knight. He makes the mistake of taking the knight and not moving it back. I immediately take the bishop for free. My opponent immediately goes freaking bishop a4, absolute pin, but pay attention, this is already defended, and this knight is completely trapped. Knight can't go here, knight can't go here, king defends and defends. Everything is defend, and even let's say, and I discover attack the knight. So 2 attackers, 0 defenders. Eventually this knight's gonna go. It's just all about when I immediately centralize my bishop and defend my knight here. And I have complete domination over the dark squares. My objective in this endgame is to simply put all these pawns on dark squares, something called material complex. As I say again, freaking move 17, yep. And there we go. Move 14. My opponent decides to trade off his final bishop, which in expert level is very stupid. Why? Because it has 1 minor piece, 2 rooks, and I have the scope of both bishops, which is a very easable convertible endgame. All I have to do is try to centralize my king and my bishops and simply just hunt down white's pawns with the king in the center and making a sort of I wish I had a editing game to show it. My opponent immediately does another inaccuracy. Why? Because this pawn is eventually going to potentially become a threat as I play Stockfish. Why? Because it's a 3-3 majority. However, I always put my bishop here to simply get out of the way, but also constantly guard this pawn because this knight has an opportunity now to take it. So immediately now we transition to almost to freaking, wait, no, hold on, is this it? Yes, right. Yes, I immediately go and take the free. Yes, I immediately take the free knight. My opponent resigned. And now we transition to bishop move 18, king d2, and freaking bishop takes 8. Takes freaking bishop goes to bishop takes 8-1. My only immediately Stockfish gives back. It trades loses one of its most powerful fighting pieces. So strictly a rook and king endgame. I have 2 minor pieces and a rook and a king, which is very easily convertible if I do not mess up. I immediately get my knight out of danger. 19 g freaking 19 g6 to reroute it and to potentially try to reroute the knight in the future to here, here, push here. Yeah, that knight's 5. Yeah, my knight's probably gonna be inactive for now. I digress. 19c6. My Stockfish goes immediately. Freaking Philly makes the big 4 pawn chain over here. Goes freaking let's go freaking h2, g3, f4, freaking e5. No, f4, e5. I immediately get my knight out the way, not to get swarmed by Stockfish. I immediately centralize my rook to attempt to do a tactic with a discovered check. Stockfish sees it, moves out the way, and discovered checks me. I simply say, hey, let's trade rooks. Stockfish trades his rook. Now it's just a 2 minor piece advantage endgame against king and pawns, which is very easily convertible. Now the whole objective right now it is move 24. Let's go. Yes, and even to go and show you that right, king to d8 is a critical moment. I'm trading the rooks. When in hand of material, you trade pieces. When behind, you trade pawns. By removing the rooks, I eliminate the only piece that can create tactical calculation or swindles. This dramatically reduces the calculation burden. As you see again. Excuse me. Now 24 to 30 is king centralization and structure. My objective is to activate the king and fix the pawn structure. 24, immediately as I go f6. Why? It immediately stops. Immediately starts to damage this long pawn chain that Stockfish already created. And the pawn activity in the center and the freaking king side. Stop using the e5 square as an outpost for even the freaking so immediately we trade off pawns. I immediately get a pawn for free. Stockfish has to move out the way, and the whole objective of this bishop here is to stop this pawn now from promoting. Now you see it has a 2 to 3 majority. The reason why my bishop is just sitting here is to simply have this scope of this entire diagonal and to guard this constantly freaking a7. So simply now I immediately start to continue to damage Stockfish's pawn structure. Put an in-between move check. I take an extra pawn, which could technically be an inaccuracy. And they immediately have 2 double isolated pawns. And now I immediately go for the promotion. F3. Stockfish goes to D1. I immediately go freaking F2. Immediately putting my pawn in the 7th rank. My knight on the rim is protecting it. And this is another passed pawn. This bishop has the entire scope on the diagonal. We simply just continue to convert. And now even move 26. This is where you get greedy. Why? Because every pawn counts. Every little details. In endgame, every small details, every amount of greed counts. Why? Because it reduces Stockfish's statistical ability to reduce counterplay. Let's go back. And let's go back. And even, let's even go back and explain why in move 29. Because I missed something. Immediately, even for myself, when I start, I put my king behind the knight. I don't immediately, put my king out there. Why? Because I want to control the variables just a little bit more before I get my king to the central side of the board. And I want to put my pawn in the 7th rank before I run my king in these most powerful squares. Now, even me, the main reason of coordinating, I'm ensuring all my pieces, my bishop, my knight, are working together before I push the king for the win. The phase 3 is make me, as you obviously seen, 131 to 38, is creating the pass pawn. This is technically a pass pawn, but this is a 7th rank pawn, which is a very immediate threat as we go back. If you pay attention, this is just me simply ripping apart Stockfish's pawn structure to get a pass pawn, which I immediately take initiative of. Now we go to 30. Even move 31, F5 is the freaking pass pawn. Why? Because this knight is constantly defending this pawn. And simply, this knight always can rotate here to defend it if it gets on the 3rd rank. and it's going to just simply get this pawn the ability to pass too. So Stockfish can't be at 2 places at once, which makes the game winning by inevitable. Even me, I immediately do even knight move 34. If you noticed, let's even go. And break this down even slower, because I feel like I'm going too fast. Immediately me going frickin' to knight to f4 to fork the king and the pawn to make another pass pawn, just in case this pawn somehow gets gone. Move 37, f3 and f2 is simply executing a push the pawn rapidly, and I'm correctly calculating where the king, d1 and e2 was too slow to stop the pawn. And my knight on h2 is perfectly placed to guard the pawn's motion square for simply, he's freaking right. He's freaking here. No, that's not it. Yeah, here. Because simply this pawn is not going to move until my king comes and gets the help. Why? Because let's say if Stockfish took the knight. It's just a queen. Right? And I just continue to make a box. And it's just lollies, mate. Now let's continue. As Stockfish continues, let's go 39 to even 51. I'm slowly just building a mating zag. Now my pawn is secure and 1 square from promotion. My king marches, as you see, all the way down the board. Because these Stockfish pawn is completely stuck, and this pawn, pay very close attention, gets taken. This is the whole reason why I put my bishop on b1, to stop the eventual Stockfish trying to trick me and getting a queen to eventually put counterplay. Pay attention to this. To stop it, and to defend the pawn, if you want to say. And then, you just march the king up the board, eventually force a promotion. I immediately take Stockfish, just gives up, puts itself in the corner. Why can't it escape? Guards this square, queen guards this square, pawn guards this square, knight guards this square, king is in danger, and the bishop has scope right here. This is an absolutely disgusting mating that. The observation is notice how Stockfish, white couldn't do anything but shuffle. This is what we call Zugzwang. Any move that white made worked in this position. And obviously, finally, move 51 was checkmate. The finish I didn't promote. I promoted with mate. This shows the precise calculation of the king's escape square. What's the summary of all this technique? I played against Stockfish in 7-3 high-level endgame concept. Simplification. I didn't keep the rooks on the board for fun. I traded down to remove risk, move 23. Piece activity. I utilized my extra minor pieces, bishop and knight, to strip away white's remaining pieces, move 26. The pass pawns, I recognized the F pawn as your win condition and pushed it aggressively, move 36 to 38. Now, this is entirely correlating to the backwards method and was completely, which Jose Raul Campblanca, I'd say really founded in chess history. This study guide analyzes a conversion phase, a specific technique required to transfer a winning position to a one game, even against a perfect defensive engine against Stockfish. As analysis commences immediately, the following opponent's resignation as the fair replaces me, the player, faces the engine. And the objective was very simple, to eliminate all counterplay and transition to a decisive endgame. And to centralize the kingdom and the structure refinement of my pawn structures, paraphylexics, material error, being greedy on material. It's a very big word, but it's basically acquisitionness justified. Why aggressively trying to create a structural weakness, I correctly identified and exploited the F pawn as a free gain. I captured that pawn, also praying for the subcrease advance of my own pawns on the F file and the H file, if need be. Now, let's even go back and show the final part of the video. This is how much I played against my opponent. Not sure the next opponent. I played a 90%, 80% accuracy. This is what my method gets you. 0 inaccuracy, 0 mistakes, 0 blunder. Engine like its average sentimental pawn loss. And this is what you do when you when you use the method of the backwards method. You get 98% accuracy. Thank you guys. Enjoy. Have a good rest of your evening.